changeover. So I'm the Director of Learning, Inclusion and Skills in Derby, and I've been in Derby City for about 5 years, but have previously worked in Oxfordshire and in Sheffield. I'll tell you the story, and I know what our starting point is, probably from quite a low base. Just from the conversation and the presentation that I've seen in the last few minutes, it's clear that people are doing some quite sophisticated work, and this may seem to be slightly below your level. But this is the story of Derby and where we were and where we are with reducing tribunals. So moving on, thank you. In June 2019, the local area had a poor local area send inspection and received a written statement of action with 5 areas to improve. And of course, that was you know, a big stress for the city and the local area, and tribunals were just a sort of a symptom really of what was going wrong. Certainly there was a lot to fix, and you know, there'd been a huge number, and you know, that's very unhealthy, isn't it? 70 plus tribunals lodged in 2017 involved, and everybody just ends up focusing on the wrong things because you're just trying to fix everything at the wrong end of the system. So you know, that's the position we were in. So I felt it was symptomatic. Moving on, I'm going to give you some information first, and then I'll talk to you a little bit about how we've actually achieved it. So by calendar year, the number of mediation cases held in Derby was 41, so it had reduced in 2018 in terms of those which went through, and came down to 30 in 2019, and then 19 in 2020. And then 51.2% were followed by appeals to tribunals, and there is some other data there, and there's a general reduction. But what we really wanted to talk about today was the massive reduction between 2019 and 20, and we had the second largest reduction of all local authorities, beaten only, I believe, by Cheshire East, which I'm very upset about. I wanted to be number 1, but we're number 2. So Derby's rate reduced, and we were reducing from a lower base. So I absolutely acknowledge that some of you will be not have those high rates of tribunals anyway. So what caused this dramatic improvement? I don't know, Katie, including disagreement resolution figures. I don't know. This is the national, taken from the national data. Moving on, thank you. So in 2021, there were fewer than 15 mediation cases held than the previous year. No mediation cases that were followed by appeals to tribunal, which was down from 9, 44% reduction in the total number of cases logged for tribunal, again down from 62 to 35. And it really books the trend of increasing numbers of appeals year on year. Q1 and Q2 of 2021, there were no mediation cases held and no tribunals held. 5 cases were logged for tribunal Q1 21 and in Q2. The Tribunals Working Group, which I'll come to in a minute, reports that the mediation service is now working well, and this has helped to dramatically reduce the number of tribunals. But there is a backstory to that which I want to tell you. Moving on. So at the time of the send inspection, June 2019, significant changes were made, and in October 2019 I became the new Director of Inclusion. Previously I had learning and skills but not inclusion. That was held in the commissioners, the Director of Commissioning. So it was the first time that I'd actually ever led inclusion across the City Council. I've always been focused on the school improvement side of things and was myself a primary head teacher. So yeah, I've seen it all from the school side, but never really been in the nuts and bolts within the council. So the thing for me was to really understand what was going wrong, and I commissioned a lean review of the EHCP process, because that was, you know, just like spaghetti junction, and just wanted to get a clear view, and also to get a common some common language about it and an opportunity for everybody involved to kind of have their say about where things were going wrong, which they were. Coupled with that, I then also commissioned an internal financial audit of SEND tribunals, looking at how could I find a way into what was happening there. And what was really interesting was that the financial audit and the lien review were conducted by two separate teams. Audit was obviously the financial, the audit team, and lien review was by our change management team, two completely separate parts of the council. But they came to exactly the same conclusions about everything we know, which I now know about wasted opportunities to resolve issues sooner. Certainly needed to improve internal systems, become more customer focused, and invest in earlier mediation with families. So the key action for me as a new director was to firstly commission those two reviews, and then to take the action which was to establish what we call the Tribunals Working Group. Next slide, thank you. So the Tribunals Working Group, my passion is collaboration and working with parents and co-production. So completely natural zone for me to be in. It wasn't the natural element for a lot of people in the council, and I think this is where we've gone wrong in the past. But certainly putting together that group and getting, looking at the review, looking at the recommendations from the internal audit and picking that up. I also took the opportunity to use some of the COVID grant funding to invest in SENDIAS, and SENDIAS actually doesn't sit with me, it sits over still in commissioning, just everything else is with me in inclusion. But I felt it was a worthwhile investment. And again, they looked at every single case coming through. I let them get on with it. I didn't interfere. I wanted to see what this super group of people would find together. One of the things we found was that the SEND lawyer was probably causing more trouble than she was solving, and parents didn't have a lot of confidence in our legal team, and it's been very combative. So there was some soft intelligence as well as hard data that came through this group. But they did look at every case and agreed specific action, and they were open and transparent. And the most important thing for me as an educationalist was that it was child-centred. The child was at the centre of those discussions and decisions. Moving on, thank you. So far, SENDIAS have now offered the intervention, which is obviously pre-mediation, to an excess of over 100 parents since January 2020. And they contacted the service requesting support to appeal local authority decisions. I think there'd been thoughts in the past about SENDIAS being a little bit the enemy in the council, and it just seemed to be a really hard thing for some people to overcome, that we were working in partnership with SENDIAS, because are you working against yourself? Just lack of understanding of the real spirit of collaboration, and also keeping child at the centre. So, this is real culture change here in Derby. Intervention was offered to work with parents, and we really just supported them and tried to unpick where things were going wrong. Why is it that a parent wanted to take this sort of formal approach, and why wasn't it possible to resolve things at school level or within the SEND teams in the council? Surely the answers had to come sooner. They just really invested a huge amount of work, and people knew, because we set out that we had this intention to do things differently, that we expected everybody to respond to that. So, if you like, this was a very important engine room of cultural change, and certainly parents were very much involved, very much well received by parents. Parent Carer Forum at the heart of the group, and 67 out of the 106 offers were taken up by parents. And they were very, very welcome. Next slide, thank you. So, as I said earlier, we've been recognised as the second most improved local authority in England. We avoided 39 tribunals. I mean, this may sound very unhealthy to some of you who have perhaps virtually none, but out of 106 that could potentially have been lodged, with a further 17 still in progress, or if you like, in process. But it's really resulted in improved parental relationships, confidence in the local authority, that we want to actually do this work and co-produce. And we have made a combined saving by avoiding those 39 appeals around 298,000, because I did start this with an internal financial audit to show that there was wasted money going, as well as heartache and destruction of relationships. If you get to that point, then something's, you know, essentially going wrong somewhere in the system. So there's information there about in the pie chart about you know, conceded, upheld, etc., etc. And these slides will be shared later, I believe. Moving on, thank you. So we have had lots of challenges. You know, sometimes, you know, the timescales, when it comes to us, we've got very little time in which to intervene. Earliest possible contact not always undertaken, and we've got really interested in what you were saying earlier about everybody's responsibility and a range of officers being available. And actually, you know, I suppose because I oversee the high needs budget, I'm really feeling all of this, and it matters. But for other people, they don't see it. It's not their budget. It's not their pressure. You know, they are part of the SEND system, the SEND ecosystem, and it's getting everybody to feel the value of the resource that's available, and actually the pressures on that resource. Because of the close liaison with the council, with, you know, with my teams, there was potential to damage SENDIAS's reputation as an independent body. You know, that has come up a few times, but actually, because it's been so focused on solution focused and helping families and focusing on the young person, then that has not actually you know, didn't turn out to be a really big issue. The capacity to sustain pre-mediation interventions, again, it's about capacity and time available. Decision-making processes are not always timely, responses are not always timely from the local authority, and that's just because we've got very, very high demand. But, you know, we are definitely improving and in a better and better place. What I will say is that we've also this year just been to Schools Forum, who have allocated, I think it's a further 50,000 to continue this work, and that will almost entirely go to SENDIAS. So I believe we're investing at the right end, and it is a bit different, but it's because something radical needed to be done, and I really believe that we're doing the right things for the right reasons now, and having, you know, having a good outcome. I think next step discussion. So how can we make sure that decisions made at our panel be more robust? For example, the HC needs assessment information received is not enough. And there's quite a lot there about our internal processes and just needing to be stronger and make sure the information is robust. But we have also just moved over from quite an ad hoc, I won't say paper-based, but electronic system to using liquid logic, and that's just happened in the last few months. So we now have transferring all EHCPs onto liquid logic, and I think that will really help in terms of communication. I think, you know, we can never do enough in terms of communication with families earlier before a decision is issued, perhaps. And we're just looking at ways that we can, you know, who holds that key relationship with families. Our SEND EHCP officers are under tremendous pressure, you know, because of the demand for EHCPs, and there's just, you know, there's quite a lot of areas around in terms of relationship management with parents that needs further investment. And I'm part of the National High Needs Delivery Advisory Board, and that's one of the things that we're looking at, whether or not there's a missing layer of people to work with families, sort of advocates really, and that's not the EHCP team. We need to improve timely responses and also to look at sustainability, and that's why we went to School Forum, interestingly. They were very supportive of it and made the decision very quickly to invest, could see the benefit of it for the whole system, because that money then, certainly there's nearly £300,000 there that's still within the high needs block that would have been lost. And how do we carry on supporting and continue the success that we've had? Thank you.
Thank you so very much. Super helpful, and we've had some positive comments in the chat there. If you have any questions, please feel free to either put your hand up or drop them into the chat. So Pauline, so we've got a question there from Robert Hardy. Sorry, Rachel. We'll start with Rachel. Is there health involvement in the Tribunals working group?
Yeah, we do. We do. We've because of the written statement of action, we brought together the DCO was involved, so that was really helpful, and a greater involvement with various teams, health visitors, etc. And it meant that because we had to start post inspection, building relationships across the SEND system, we could also, through our other SEND networks, bring people into particular cases. We didn't want the group to be too big and too heavy and cumbersome, and we didn't want it to become a board. It was very much a working group that was looking at individual cases and prioritising them, but definitely the DCO was involved too. Yeah.
Fantastic. And Robert Hardy, so this is a question more of a comment about improving the quality of the casework and the relationship built with families. Did you want to add to that, Robert?
Sorry, really slow to unmute. Not really, just that it was an observation rather than a question, because whatever local structure for the local area, whatever protocols and whatever else, this boils down to the quality of the relationship with the family, yeah, between the family, the school and the local authority. So this is a really good example of putting a structure into that works for Derby.
Well, yeah, absolutely, Robert, which is why I was so keen to say at the beginning, we were starting from a position of dysfunction and a failing system. Ofsted and the CQC told us that, but I needed to bring in even greater depth, because it didn't, it's clear that exactly what you've said. It's all about the relationships, all about the systems, and somehow having the lean review and the internal audit sort of systematised and I suppose depersonalised some of it, so we were actually able to talk about the system failures, but then through that we actually began to build the relationships and confidence through co-production, which with parents and other people. So yeah, absolutely, we shouldn't need this group. A healthy SEND system should not need this approach, but we were where we were and we are where we are, and it will keep evolving.
Thanks, Pauline. There's a question from Claire Merchant-Jones. Did you want to talk through that, Claire?
Sure. Hi, Pauline. Thank you. That was so interesting and insightful. I think I'm talking after lunch, and we're behind you, if you like, in terms of our numbers. We're probably where you were a year ago or so. One of the things that's really interesting about the figures and numbers you're talking about is we're often on a precipice around, are we taking poor decisions, or are we not articulating the decisions we've taken and bringing families with us on that decision making kind of journey, if you like, for want of a less rubbish word, to help them understand that all is well, and that to help reassure them that the things they're going to need from a school setting, let's say, will be in place at SEN support or whatever we're calling it. And so I'm interested in whether you're finding that you're overturning decisions once you know more, or you are helping families to not continue the dispute because they understand more about the decisions that are being made.
I think there's both going on. I think that would be the honest answer. I think I'm not going to use the word fault, but there's misunderstandings on both sides really, and we absolutely need to improve our not just decision making processes, but our communication and real understanding of why a decision has been made, and how could we have made a different decision, what information and relationships might we have needed sooner, for example with the school or setting, to not get to this position, so the parent then isn't in that position. But certainly certainly it's both, I would say. We may overturn the decision, or as you say, we may actually be in the fortunate position to be able to explain to a family that and persuade them that actually we do care, that we want the right child in the right placement and with the right support. And I think that that's coming through increasingly, rather than we're doing this because we're baddies and we just want to save money. It's actually engaging in that dialogue shows that we care, and then whatever the decisions are, people understand you've been through this process, and I think the care at the centre of it is so important.
And I guess the stakes rise as each decision is taken. So it might be that some of those were refusal to assess, where actually the local authority might take the agreement to overturn the decision and take an assessment. But what we find, and one of the tensions that I guess is coming out from today, is that kind of rolling then issuing a plan, yes or no. It's all those kind of those decisions seem to roll like a tumbleweed, don't they?
It is an ecosystem. Yeah, it's an ecosystem, and it's about people believing that you're doing the right thing for the right reason. So I won't go into it too much detail, but we are just tightening up and putting in our new pre-EHCP panel. Again, we will be turning down more. You know, too many EHCPs we're going through. We will be turning down more. But what we're saying is, but we really care about you, and actually there's this instead. So, you know, we are then re-signposting into the graduated response and looking at real practical help as to anything we can do to support. Because we can't sustain, and it wasn't right, the thresholds weren't quite right. So yeah, and that might mean we have a spike in tribunals, I don't know, but we'll continue to do this work as we do the other high needs transformation work, and see what has a knock-on effect into what. But you know, certainly we feel that whatever we've done has given parents greater confidence that we care.
Thanks for that. We have a question from Denise, who wanted to know whether or not your working group, do they convene for every appeal, or just for a few?
Yeah, everyone. Yeah.
And then there's a question from Naomi and Andrew, both interested as to was there any trends in terms of where these appeals sit in terms of section BFI, CG?
Jane, I don't know if Jane has any insight into that. Our DCO's in the meeting.
Hi, thanks, Pauline. Oh, it's a question. I don't want to feel like I need to touch wood now. Generally, we don't have a high number of single route of redress cases crossing everything now.
I think when we came to the when we were inspected, when we had the revisit in November, I'm not sure that there might have only been one.
Yeah, one this year. Yeah.
Dan,
Dan, yeah, you're in the.
Yeah, I think historically the majority of our tribunals were section I. We still get very few C, D, G and H, extended powers. I think there was 3 last year.
Yeah.
I think what we've seen is a shift towards appeals around no to assess, no to issue over the last 12 months, and they've become the kind of predominant reason for an appeal, and that's why, as Pauline's mentioned, we're doing a significant piece of work around our panel processes and our decision making to try and understand whether that's the decision making, how we're communicating it, the offer, is the offer of graduated response an appropriate offer or not.
Yeah, Dan's my superb SEND manager, and every day I thank God that he came to work in Derby. But just answering that question, is this going to be a push factor as we tighten the criteria, bringing Derby back into a healthier position and more in line with the national trajectory, because our increase in EHCPs in the previous year was double that, and nationally it was 10 point something percent, and we were 21%, something like that. So it's still too high. So it's not a healthy position to be in, and it's because the graduated response is either not as strong as it should be or not communicated as well as it should be. So a lot of our work is, no, you're not going to get an EHCP, but yes, you're going to get something else instead. And we have appointed 2 Senko advice workers who provide what we call the Derby Senko advice line, and they're also helping people to re-navigate the the graduated response, as well as we'd invested again with COVID money, grant money, into SEND navigators who work within the parent carer forum. So, you know, it's about, you know, when you turn something down or no to assess, there's something else instead, and it's the something else that's got to be built, and we're doing that's the hardest work.
Fantastic. We're just running out of time, but there was just one question from Michelle, and apologies, this probably relates to something you were talking about 2 minutes ago, but she was asking about whether there was a correlation with the work that you have been doing and an increase in specialist and independent placements.
Well, we are we're placing more and more children and young people into mainstream, that the data tells us, but the demand in general is high. So yeah, we are placing a lot in specialist provision as well, but we do have also a healthy proportion of those in mainstream. So one of the dilemmas there is that they're quite expensive to maintain because of their lack of specialism. They may require more top-up funding to actually maintain those places, but you know, we're currently we have a capital programme, and we're looking at expanding the ER network, as well as judicious expansion of our specialist school stock. And you know, we're not building loads of new special schools because I know that's happened in other places and they just become filled. The key thing is strengthening the graduated response and supporting mainstream.
Thank you so much, Pauline. It's been really interesting. There's some really good positive comments there. You'll probably want to read back on, I think, a couple of requests to see your transformation plan.
Yeah, I've put my email address there. If anybody wants to email, I can send stuff.
Fantastic. So yeah, I hope everyone just join me in thanking Pauline for sharing today. In fact, we appreciate all contributions from local areas. So we're going to move